Thank you for listening. This course was created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional podcasts, books, newsletters, and cool merchandise await. Let's get started. Principles serve as anchors when navigating the complex world of artificial intelligence. They offer orientation in a landscape that might otherwise feel like shifting sand, where technologies evolve quickly and pressures to deploy rapidly can blur judgment. Guiding principles draw their roots from global ethics discussions, where philosophers, policymakers, and technologists have debated how human values should be translated into practice. Organizations often enshrine these principles in charters, codes of conduct, or governance frameworks, giving them institutional force. Importantly, principles are not meant to remain lofty ideals. Their value comes when they are translated into operational guidance policies, processes, and practices that shape how AI systems are designed, deployed, and managed. By articulating principles clearly and applying them consistently, organizations can create continuity between ethical aspiration and technical implementation. This bridge ensures that responsibility is not rhetorical but embedded in daily work. One of the most widely discussed principles is fairness. At its core, fairness demands equitable treatment and outcomes across groups, ensuring that no demographic is systematically disadvantaged by AI systems. The risks are clear. Biases present in training data or model design can translate into discriminatory results, whether in hiring, lending, or healthcare. Fairness is not a single metric. It is highly context-dependent. What counts as fair in credit scoring may differ from fairness in medical diagnostics. This is why fairness requires the use of tailored, context-specific measures rather than one-size-fits-all formulas. Moreover, fairness cannot be achieved with a one-time adjustment. Ongoing monitoring is necessary, since models deployed into dynamic environments may drift, producing new inequities over time. Responsible practice therefore treats fairness as a continuous process, not a static achievement. Transparency is another cornerstone principle, and it often underpins trust. Transparency refers to making AI systems understandable and accessible, not just to specialists, but to users, regulators, and the public. This includes disclosing capabilities and limitations, clarifying where AI is in use, and explaining how outputs are generated. Transparency supports regulatory compliance, as many jurisdictions now require organizations to provide explanations for automated decisions. Yet transparency is not about overwhelming users with technical minutiae. It requires clarity without overload plain language explanations that convey meaningful insight. For example, a hiring platform might explain that it scores applicants based on experience and skills rather than providing opaque probability scores. Transparency builds bridges between complex systems and the people affected by them, helping transform suspicion into confidence. Accountability ensures that when AI systems make or influence decisions, there is a clear human responsibility behind them. This means that organizations must be able to trace decisions back to processes and people, with transparent lines of oversight. Accountability involves assigning roles so that it is never ambiguous who is responsible for a given outcome. Effective accountability also requires escalation paths and redress mechanisms, allowing individuals to challenge or appeal outcomes. Without institutional backing, accountability risks becoming a hollow phrase. Organizations need structures that empower oversight bodies, allocate resources for audits, and enforce corrective measures when issues arise. Accountability is what transforms guiding principles from suggestions into enforceable commitments. It ensures that when things go wrong, there is both ownership and a mechanism to address the harm. Safety is often seen as the most urgent principle, since the prevention of harm is foundational in any responsible practice. Safety in AI extends beyond physical harm to psychological and societal dimensions. For instance, systems that spread misinformation can undermine democratic processes, while poorly designed chatbots can cause distress in sensitive contexts. Proactive risk identification is key. Organizations must anticipate not only intended uses, but also potential misuse and unintended consequences. Safety requires layered safeguards, much like cybersecurity relies on defense in depth. These layers may include technical controls, human oversight, and contingency planning. By weaving safety measures throughout development and deployment, organizations protect individuals and society from harms that could otherwise erode trust and cause real damage. Privacy is another principle closely tied to human dignity. It concerns respect for individuals, rights to control their personal data. In practice, this means minimizing data collection, securing informed consent, and ensuring data is used only for legitimate purposes. Legal frameworks like the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe have pushed privacy to the forefront, but beyond compliance, privacy represents empowerment. When users have control over their data, knowing what is collected, how it is used, and how to opt out, they engage with AI systems from a position of agency rather than vulnerability. Privacy also serves as a check against overreach, reminding organizations that technological capability does not equate to ethical legitimacy. By embedding privacy as a principle, organizations balance innovation with respect for the individual. Another guiding principle is beneficence, a term drawn from the medical ethics tradition. Beneficence refers to the obligation to act in ways that promote good and contribute to human welfare. Applied to AI, it means designing systems with the intent to generate positive outcomes, whether by improving healthcare access, streamlining services, or expanding educational opportunities. Beneficence is not just about creating efficiency, it is about ensuring that the net effect of technology advances well-being. Of course, benefits must be weighed against potential risks, since an innovation that helps some but harms others cannot be considered fully beneficent. This principle pushes developers and organizations to ask not only whether they can build something, but whether its introduction will tangibly improve lives. By adopting beneficence as a principle, responsible AI emphasizes proactive contribution, not just harm avoidance. Justice is closely related, but it broadens the lens to focus on structural fairness across society. Whereas fairness often looks at outcomes within a specific context, justice considers broader societal implications, particularly for vulnerable or marginalized groups. Justice demands that AI not exacerbate existing inequities or create new ones, whether in access to credit, healthcare, or public services. The challenge is that standards of justice vary between local contexts and global perspectives. What one society sees as equitable may conflict with another's traditions or laws. This tension does not diminish the importance of justice. Rather, it highlights the responsibility of organizations to reflect carefully on the contexts into which they deploy AI. Especially in large-scale systems that affect millions, justice provides a moral compass, reminding practitioners that responsibility extends beyond efficiency and profitability toward fairness in social structures. Autonomy emphasizes respect for individual choice. In AI, autonomy means that people should have the ability to consent, to opt out, and to make informed decisions about how technology affects them. Risks to autonomy include manipulative system designs that nudge or coerce users into behaviors without their awareness. For example, a platform that recommends products without disclosing its commercial incentives undermines user choice. Autonomy requires transparency, but it goes further. It demands that systems be structured to empower rather than restrict individuals. Empowerment might mean offering clear explanations, accessible opt-out options, or meaningful alternatives to automated decisions. Autonomy is critical because it ensures that AI enhances human agency rather than eroding it, preserving dignity in an era of pervasive automation. Human oversight acts as a safeguard against over-reliance on automation. While AI can process vast data and generate insights, there are contexts where human judgment must remain decisive, especially in high-stakes areas such as healthcare, justice, or finance. Oversight involves building mechanisms for humans to intervene, review, and override automated outcomes when necessary. Escalation processes are vital, allowing disputes to be addressed and corrected. The concept of the human in the loop reflects this safeguard, ensuring that automation does not become autonomous in ways that strip away accountability. Oversight acknowledges that AI, no matter how advanced, cannot replicate human values, empathy, and moral reasoning. By embedding oversight, organizations ensure that responsibility remains grounded in human decision-making, even as machines grow more capable. These principles rarely operate in isolation. Instead, they overlap and sometimes conflict. Fairness, justice, and beneficence often reinforce one another, all aiming to protect vulnerable groups and promote equity. Yet transparency can sometimes conflict with privacy, since revealing too much about a system may risk exposing sensitive data. Safety can restrict autonomy, as measures to prevent harm may limit personal choices. Similarly, the pursuit of efficiency may clash with fairness, creating tensions in algorithm design. Accountability structures may slow innovation if processes are perceived as burdensome. These conflicts are not reasons to abandon principles but reminders that responsibility requires balance. Applying principles in practice means navigating trade-offs thoughtfully, integrating them, rather than treating them as isolated checkboxes. Global variations highlight how culture shapes principle interpretation. In the European Union, emphasis often falls on dignity, rights, and protections rooted in humanistic traditions. In the United States, innovation and accountability are central themes, reflecting a mix of market-driven and sector-specific governance. Asia-Pacific contexts frequently emphasize harmony, community, and collective well-being, integrating cultural values into interpretations of fairness and responsibility. These variations matter because AI systems are often deployed globally, encountering diverse expectations. For organizations, awareness of these cultural differences is essential to avoid imposing a one-size-fits-all model of responsibility. Instead, principles must be flexible enough to adapt while firm enough to maintain core protections. Global variations remind us that responsibility is not just a technical or legal concept, but also a cultural one. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Healthcare offers one of the clearest illustrations of how guiding principles intersect in practice. Diagnostic systems, for example, must prioritize safety to avoid misdiagnosis, but they also embody beneficence by striving to improve patient outcomes. Privacy is crucial because patient data is among the most sensitive information, requiring explicit consent and strict protections. Fairness must also be addressed, ensuring that tools perform consistently across diverse demographic groups rather than privileging one population. Accountability remains paramount, as clinicians and organizations must be able to trace decisions and provide recourse when errors occur. In this sector, the stakes are literally life and death, making responsible AI principles not optional but essential safeguards. Healthcare demonstrates vividly that principles are not abstract. They are operational imperatives that shape real outcomes for real people. Hiring platforms present another case where principles are tested daily. Fairness is central, as algorithms must avoid perpetuating systemic discrimination against applicants based on gender, race, or background. Transparency plays a role when candidates seek explanations for how scores or rankings are generated, and autonomy arises when applicants are given options to opt out of automated processes. Justice adds a structural perspective, pressing organizations to consider how hiring systems affect underrepresented groups over time. Together, these principles guide the creation of platforms that can enhance efficiency without sacrificing equity. The lessons are clear. Without deliberate application of guiding principles, efficiency-driven systems can become gatekeepers of inequality. With principles in place, however, they can expand access and opportunities fairly. Autonomous vehicles provide a third compelling example. Safety is the foremost concern, as vehicles must reliably protect passengers, pedestrians, and other drivers. Accountability surfaces in questions of liability when accidents occur, whether responsibility lies with manufacturers, software developers, or users. Transparency is also necessary, as companies must communicate risks, limitations, and operating conditions to the public. Privacy emerges as a principle when vehicles collect vast streams of sensor data, raising questions about surveillance and consent. These overlapping considerations reveal how principles converge in complex, high-stakes technologies. The case of autonomous vehicles shows that guiding principles are not theoretical debates, but practical necessities that determine whether innovations gain or lose public trust. Of course, tensions between principles are inevitable. Privacy and transparency often collide when organizations disclose information about system operations that inadvertently expose personal data. Safety can conflict with autonomy, as protective restrictions may limit users' freedom of choice. Efficiency pressures may push algorithms to prioritize speed or cost-effectiveness over fairness, resulting in uneven outcomes. Accountability processes may slow deployment timelines, frustrating innovation goals. These tensions highlight that principles cannot be applied mechanically. They require judgment, prioritization, and sometimes compromise. A responsible organization does not pretend these conflicts disappear, but confronts them openly, weighing trade-offs in dialogue with stakeholders. Tensions, when managed well, can lead to more robust systems, forcing organizations to innovate responsibly rather than recklessly. Operationalizing principles means translating ideals into daily practice. This involves crafting organizational policies and standards that embody guiding values and embedding them throughout model development lifecycles. Principles should shape data collection, training, testing, deployment, and monitoring. Assessment tools and metrics can help track adherence, ensuring that fairness, transparency, or safety are not only discussed but measured. Regular reviews keep principles alive, adapting them as technologies and contexts evolve. In this way, principles become living practices rather than static posters on a wall. Operationalization ensures that responsibility is not abstract, but tangible, woven into the very processes by which AI is created and maintained. It is through this translation from theory to practice that organizations build credibility and resilience. Leadership plays a pivotal role in making principles real. Leaders set the tone, signaling whether responsibility is a central value or a secondary consideration. By allocating resources, providing training, and championing cultural alignment, leaders move principles from words into action. Leadership ensures that accountability structures are not just designed but enforced, protecting them from being sidelined in the rush of innovation. When leaders embody principles themselves, they inspire teams to follow, creating a culture where responsibility is normalized. In contrast, when leadership neglects responsibility, principles risk becoming hollow rhetoric. Effective leadership is therefore not just about strategic direction, but about modeling and sustaining the ethical foundations of AI practice. Employee engagement is another essential element in embedding guiding principles. While leadership sets the tone, employees bring principles to life in everyday work. Training programs raise awareness, ensuring that staff understand what fairness, transparency, or accountability mean in their specific roles. Internal reporting channels empower employees to speak up when they see potential issues, creating a culture of vigilance rather than silence. Communities of practice cross-functional groups where teams discuss challenges and solutions can help normalize responsibility as part of routine operations. Reward systems also matter. When adherence to principles is recognized and celebrated, responsibility becomes part of professional identity rather than an extra burden. By engaging employees meaningfully, organizations distribute responsibility widely, strengthening resilience against both technical failures and ethical lapses. Communicating principles to the public is equally important. Many organizations publish their guiding values on websites or in corporate reports, signaling commitment to responsible practices. Yet the effectiveness of such communication depends on accessibility. Principles should be expressed in plain language, avoiding jargon that alienates non-experts. Providing concrete examples of actions taken, such as bias audits conducted or transparency reports released, shows that principles are not empty promises. Clear public communication builds trust with users, regulators, and society at large, demonstrating that responsibility is not confined within organizational walls. It also holds organizations accountable, since public commitments are harder to retract or ignore. Transparent, accessible communication thus transforms principles into social contracts between organizations and the communities they serve. Despite their benefits, guiding principles are not immune to skepticism. Critics worry about vague or aspirational language that lacks enforcement mechanisms, reducing principles to mere public relations tools. The term ethics washing captures the danger of organizations proclaiming values while failing to embed them in practice. Others argue that principles may slow down innovation by imposing additional layers of review and oversight. Global consensus also remains elusive, as cultural differences shape interpretations and priorities. These critiques are valuable reminders that principles must be lived, not just stated. To remain credible, organizations must demonstrate how principles translate into tangible policies, practices, and outcomes. Skepticism challenges organizations to deepen their commitments, ensuring that principles remain robust guides rather than decorative slogans. The benefits of clear, well-implemented principles are substantial. They enhance stakeholder trust, showing customers, regulators, and employees that the organization takes responsibility seriously. They provide consistency in decision-making, especially under pressure, when ethical shortcuts might otherwise seem tempting. Principles offer a clear basis for compliance and audits, aligning organizational practices with external expectations. They also help navigate ethical trade-offs, providing a structured way to balance competing priorities. In essence, principles act as both compass and shield, orienting organizations toward responsible practices, while protecting them from reputational and regulatory harm. Their clarity and consistency transform responsibility from an aspiration into a sustainable practice, enabling organizations to innovate with confidence. As this episode draws to a close, let us revisit the major guiding principles discussed: fairness, transparency, accountability, safety, privacy, beneficence, justice, autonomy, and human oversight. We explored their interconnections, tensions, and global variations, showing how they overlap, reinforce, or conflict depending on context. Case examples in healthcare, hiring, and autonomous vehicles illustrated how these principles manifest in practice, highlighting both benefits and challenges. We also examined how principles move from rhetoric to reality through leadership, employee engagement, and operationalization. The message is clear. Principles matter because they anchor practice, enabling responsible AI to be more than a slogan. Looking forward, the series will turn toward the broader risk landscape, examining the threats and vulnerabilities that responsible AI must confront. Understanding risks is the natural complement to principles, since it shows not just what we aspire to achieve, but what we must guard against. Together, principles and risk awareness provide a foundation for sustainable, trustworthy AI systems. As you continue listening, consider how the principles introduced here might apply in your own environment, whether as guideposts for design, criteria for evaluation, or commitments to communicate. The journey of responsible AI is ongoing, but principles give us a map to follow with integrity. Thanks for tuning in to Bare Metal Cyber, your trusted source for cybersecurity educational materials, news, and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.